This is Damian Macy. I'm representing the Friends of the Marshall Public Library in our Oral History Project. It is Tuesday, April the 28th, and I'm at the lovely home of Peggy Morris on North 8th Street. And with that, I'll introduce you to Peggy.
Yes, this is Peggy Morris. I was born in Marshall, Illinois, 9/12/33. I was born in a house that's west on Archer. My parents were Virginia McClure Malloy and J.E. Jott Malloy. My siblings were Catherine Ann and Patricia Jane. I am a native of Marshall, but I did move away in 1954. I came back to Marshall in 1974. And I lived in Florida when I first moved from Marshall. And when I left Florida, I moved to Terre Haute, Indiana.
Where in Florida did you reside?
Belle Glade.
Belle Glade.
My neighborhood in Marshall was really neat. I had many friends. We played together. I really grew up most of my life at 406 Ash Street. And the neighborhood has changed, of course, because the people have changed. My neighbors were really nice people. We were very close, with the exception of a Mrs. Plank who lived next door to us. And I had a pet duck, Alexander, and we think that Mrs. Plank poisoned Alexander. So that was one memory that was not cool. And I didn't have any chores at home, which my older siblings really did not like. But I was outside playing and all kinds of games, and we had lots of friends.
I'd like to come back just a minute to that pet duck. I have not talked to anyone that had a pet duck. Was it something that someone had given you, or did you acquire?
Are we on? Well, the fact that my dad was a poultry dealer, I'm wondering now, I don't remember it at the time that I got the duck, but I'm kind of wondering if one of the farmers locally didn't give him the duck, and he brought it home to me, and I named the duck Alexander, so apparently the duck was male.
Did it have like a tub to splash around in?
Oh no, it ran kind of loose.
Okay.
And
would it have a pin or a pet
it
or
did.
a
I
leash or
think
anything?
it had a pin. But Mrs. Plank was right next door, and I think that was her criticism, is that she didn't like the duck in her yard.
And sometimes ducks will dig and nibble on flowers and stuff.
Oh yes, that may have been one of the reasons.
Okay.
And my church has always been St. Mary's Catholic Church in Marshall. And of course, when I lived out of state, out of town, I always attended Catholic churches wherever I lived. And I went to school in Marshall, and I went to college at St. Mary of the Woods in Terre Haute. And I just have great memories about all the girls from out of state and out of town that I met at St. Mary's. We came over to Marshall. I brought 10 of them to spend the night one Saturday night, and they weren't used to getting up at the crack of dawn, going to Mass. Of course, we were all Catholic. So I woke them up and just gave them about 20 minutes.
Ouch.
So we all went to Mass. It was in the winter. We all went to Mass in our pajamas and long coats. But I do have a lot of neat memories.
The Woods campus is so beautiful.
Isn't that? Yeah.
And this time of year, too, is especially attractive.
And they've changed a lot of it since I was there. I would have graduated in 55 if I would have gone.
What was their reaction, I guess, to small-town life of Marshall? College students you
Oh, my
brought home.
friends? Oh, they loved it. They got a kick out of going to church in their PJs. Yeah, they all liked it over here. Well, a lot of them were from Chicago.
That's what I thought. This probably from
Small
the city
town.
to go
Yeah.
to a small town would be
Small
a
towns.
different experience
Yeah,
for them.
yeah. So, my family life, are you talking current or
You can
past?
you can go back to early times and bring it up to date if you'd like.
Okay, well, my family life was great. I had wonderful parents, and they loved to party. And when I went to the second grade, Georgia Connerton was my teacher, and she was just a little bit nosy, so she would always punt me on Monday to see what my parents did on the weekend. And of course, I just told her everything I knew. You know, oh, they were partying, and some of the people were dancing, and then, as I remember, that same year, I made my first communion. And the first sin that I can remember, you probably haven't heard this, the first sin that I committed, that I remember, and I had to confess it to make my first communion, I was late for school one morning. And Georgia asked me why I was late. And I told her that I'd had an appointment with Dr. George Mitchell because I had a ringworm, which was true. I did have the ringworm. But this was at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Dr. George wasn't even in his office. And the reason I lied to her is because my mother slept in and had my sisters get our breakfast and all. And I couldn't find a belt to the dress that I was going to wear. And I looked and I looked. Finally, I found it in a top dresser drawer. And I didn't want to admit to the teacher that my mom was in bed. And I...
Well, Georgie Connerton was my second grade teacher
Was
also.
she?
And obviously you went to the old North Side School
Oh, yes.
that was up here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, I have fond memories of that second grade class also.
Oh. Did she question you about personal family things?
No, I really don't recall that she
Yeah.
did.
She always did that with me.
I guess I was considered a good teacher, and she was pretty firm. She
Yeah.
didn't take
She
any
was a good
guff.
teacher. Yeah. So, I have another school memory, and this time I'm in high school. And the principal called me down to question me about something bad that had gone on the night before. I was driving my dad's poultry truck, which said J.E. Malloy Poultry and Eggs on it, and a bunch of us went trick-or-treating. And we went down to Darwin, and we got into a watermelon patch. Now, I didn't do any of this, but a couple of the boys stole watermelons out of this patch. And then they put a tree limb across a road down there after we went by it. So the state trooper Fenton Frigger was in the office, and somebody reported it that they saw J.E. Malloy's poultry down there. So I went into the office, and of course I was a nice, friendly little gal, and they started questioning me about the damage that had been done in Darwin. And they wanted to know the names of everybody that was with me.
Oh my.
Now this was the exciting part. The last name I gave was Bob Frager, and that was the state policeman's son.
Did that kind of end it all right
Yeah.
there?
Oh, goodness.
So that was nice. And during high school and grade school, I was cheerleader for like 6 years, 7th and 8th in grade school, and all 4 years or 3 years in high school. And that's kind of a cute story too. Herbie Spires and Joanne Casemeyer and Joanne, can't remember her last name, they tried out the same time that we did, and at that time the whole student body voted. And before the vote was counted, I ran into Herbie Spires in study hall, and I, just being nice, I said, "Herbie, have you heard anything about the results yet of the cheerleading contest?" And he said, "Oh, I probably won." And I thought, well, that's a lot of nerve, but he did. I got these. And I was homecoming queen my senior year, and that was fun. And
You mentioned the principal. Do you recall who that principal was?
Hadley. C.W.
Okay.
Hadley.
That name sounds familiar
And
too.
Mr. Harrington was assistant principal. And I ended up being very good friends of the Harringtons. They were antique collectors, and when I moved from Marshall to Terre Haute, they came to visit me, and so that was nice.
When I was in school, there was a young man in my class, Richard Allen, and his father was principal. And this would have been, I think, about 1946,
It was
47 and
because
48.
my sister was in high
Okay.
school in 46, and she had Mr. Allen.
Yeah.
I think he had a child or two.
Yes, Richard, his son, was in my class.
Okay.
And then there was
Girl?
an older girl, I believe, and then they had a younger son. Excuse me. Excuse me, go on, Peggy.
Okay, so my hobbies as a child and today were quite different. My hobbies as I was a child was mostly just planning play days and getting together with all my friends. But today I picked up the hobby of antique collecting. And that's really kept me busy and interested. I love history. I love anything that's made a long time ago, and I love the craftsmanship. And so I got hooked into antiques, and it's still with me, as you can see.
Uh-huh.
So, and I did move away for a period. I was married in 1954 in Marshall, in the Catholic Church, to Jack Morrison, and we moved to Florida right after the wedding, and he became involved with a restaurant owner from Terre Haute that was living down in Palm Beach, or West Palm Beach, pardon me. So we went down there, and the restaurant business just wasn't that great, so we moved to Belle Glade, Florida, and Jack went to work for a loan company. And then we moved back to Marshall because he was transferred back here with that same company. I can't think of the name of it. And so my son Mike was probably just about a year old when we moved back here. But one neat thing about when we moved to Florida, of course, we didn't have any money. We were just starting out as a couple. And Jack was quite the budgeter, and I think this story is a riot. And he sat down with me one night, and he said, "Now, how much money do you think you'll be spending on house dresses?" I said, "What?" But his mother never wore slacks or pantsuits.
At that time, that was
Yeah.
not really
and he just
acceptable.
thought that me being a wife, I was going to need some house dresses, which I've never had one. The other story about when we lived in Florida, I went shopping for an apartment when we first got down there. And I saw an advertisement where this man had an apartment for rent, and it was in a building behind his house. His name was Mr. Gossett. He was Jewish, and they were from New York. So I knocked on his door because I thought it can't be too much for this little building, you know. And after I talked with him for a little while, he said, "Now, Peggy, you do not want to live back there behind me." He said, "That's just not good enough for you." So he moved us into his 2-story beach home right on the beach. And
Wow.
I think he probably only charged us like $50 a month. You know, that was back in '54. But anyway, we stayed there. He played bridge, and Jack and I both played bridge, and his wife had gone to New York for like 3 months. So I used his kitchen, and you know, I
big
did
house, huh?
Yeah, it was a nice big home, stucco, real pretty, with a Spanish tile roof.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jack decided that, as I said before, he wasn't very satisfied in the restaurant business, and that's where the restaurant was, in West Palm. So then he took this job in Belle Glade, and we moved to Belle Glade. Quite a bit of difference between West Palm Beach and Belle Glade. But anyway, we were only there for a few months. While we were there, my mom came down to visit us, and that was neat. But we just had a very small apartment. And one day, Mr. Hooker was the landlord, and he had the steps painted, and he put planks on them. And Jack had to get up and go to work early. So Jack felt and the paint was dry, so he just removed the planks. Oh, Mr. Hooker was furious with Jack, and I thought, uh-oh, we're going to be asked to leave, but we weren't. So that was my life in Florida. And then we moved to Marshall in 1957, it would have been. And we built a home out by Dr. George Mitchell's home in the subdivision there. And that was a neat experience. 4-bedroom and real nice home for me. And even though they called that subdivision Hog Hill, because these people had hogs.
That's
right
right.
by it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then we moved to Terre Haute. Or no, we moved to Dayton, Ohio. And Jack took a job with pharmaceutical business. When we lived in Marshall, he had opened a pharmaceutical company. And then he and I and his partner and his wife moved to Dayton with all my kids. And they sold their pharmaceutical company, which was called SIG Lab. That was up where Napa was,
Yeah.
now where the Christian store is. And Intra bought them out. So we now lived in Dayton, and all my kids started to school in Dayton. And I mean, they were older. Mike was a 7th grader, and Beth was a 5th grader, Julie was a 3rd grader, and Amy was in kindergarten. And then my 2 girls were made their confirmation in Dayton. Mike had already been confirmed. So we stayed in Dayton, Ohio for probably a year and a half, and Jack got a little restless for Terre Haute, and he was pretty successful with Intra, so he decided to move to Terre Haute. All of us moved to Terre Haute. And there we owned a home in Edgewood Grove, which I really loved, and my neighbors were wonderful. 2 Jewish people, Ann and Ish Gurman. Ann taught me a lot about cooking, even though my mother had taught me a lot, even though I didn't cook at home. But I got the taste of what good food really is like. So then Jack he bought a camper business in Terre Haute since he was semi-retired from the drug business. And we got a divorce in 1973, and actually it started in 72, but it took like a year to get an annulment for that. And then I started dating my old boyfriend, Jim Morris, which I had dated when I was 18. And I was at St. Mary the Woods. He was a graduate of Rose-Hulman. He literally broke my heart. He stepped out on me with a gal from Illinois over by St. Louis. So he quit me and married Linda. And so Norman Casemeyer, my brother-in-law, owned the Corner Tavern in Marshall. And Jim stopped in the tavern one afternoon and he asked Norman about me. And Norman said that, well, she's single now. She went through a divorce, but she's doing fine. She and her kids live in Terre Haute. And Jim said, well, is there any way I could get in touch with her? And Norman said, well, yeah, you can just call her. Of course, he wouldn't have known my number off the bat, but a friend of mine, Joanne Ryan from Terre Haute, we were real close. Her husband owned the funeral home.
Oh, yeah.
And she was at my house one afternoon, and I told her that Norman had run into Jim, and that Jim was asking me about me, and I said, he's either divorced or he's getting a divorce, I'm not sure. And so Joanne said, well, let's call him. So we did. He was working for Marathon Oil in Martinsville. Mm-hmm. So we called him, and he was glad to hear from me, and he was involved in getting a divorce. So we married then in 74, December of 74. And we moved to Casey. I left my home in Terre Haute, and we moved the kids to Casey, and they went to school. My girls, every one of them had a crush on a Masuga boy. There were 14 Masugas.
Oh, yeah.
And Beth didn't. Julie and Mag and Amy, all the Masugas were kind of smitten with my girls. They were new, out of town, you know.
Both ways, didn't it?
Yeah. And anyway, Jim sold the house in Casey, and we started looking for a home in Marshall because all the other Marathon employees couldn't live in Marshall at that time. They had to live in Casey or Martinsville. So we found Virginia Doll's house here that was built in 1879, and my sister just lived 2 doors away from Virginia Doll's house. So Jim and I looked at it, and I fell in love with it, of course, because it is historical. And
Had Virginia passed away at that time?
no, Virginia Doll sold the Mealing home that she had bought from Bill Mealing's parents. Oh, they were both deceased.
Right.
But she bought Lorene and Frank Mealing's home, the little brick one on 6th Street. Mm-hmm. And this house just got to be too big for her. You know, she was living here by herself. She was a widow and had been for probably almost 20 years. And decided that she would sell it. But the interesting thing about that was Bill asked her to buy their house for $35,000. So Virginia decided, well, if she bought that house for 35, she would have to ask 35 for this one, which was a nice deal for me. So she sold our house, and
What year was that?
that would have been in 74. Yeah. That was probably in the summer of 74.
Because we moved back here in 75, and I know you were already here
Yeah,
at that time.
yeah.
And the house was built in 1879. Okay.
And the bricks were all made for this house in Marshall, Illinois. And there are 200,000 bricks that went. Now, this was in Dee Dee Dahl's diary, which I have.
Was the house in good repair and in
Yeah,
livable condition when you
Luckily
purchased
for us, they had not done anything structural different in the house. So, and they had saved pieces, like this molding. I had more molding made from a casket dealer in Terre Haute. I don't even know if he's still there, but we found a long piece of molding up in the attic, and she had put acoustical tile ceilings in the kitchen, dining room, hallway, up and down. So we took all that out. And I invited Virginia over here one night for dinner after we had moved in. I think Jenny and Omer were here, and can't remember another couple, maybe Bill and Kate. And Virginia told them, she said, well, Peggy's ruined my house. Because this was plastered and had that imitation tile on that wall. So we took all that off, and I had the guy come in and tuck point it. So she kind of thought I ruined it. But luckily, the only really construction that we did, there was a door into the bedroom that I now use as our bedroom, right here in the hallway, which made it very convenient. But Jim didn't like that idea, people walking in the back door and
There it was better.
yeah. And there was a toilet in there and a sink, but no tub in that bedroom. So we filled the doorway up and put in a bathroom, which has been fun. Now I have a tin tub in my bathroom.
Okay. Do you know how many square feet?
When we carpeted all of it, but the kitchen, and there were 5,200 square feet. And that's not counting the attic or the basement.
I know it's one of the older homes in Marshall.
I think
and
it's the
certainly
5th.
very stately and certainly
Yeah,
beautifully taken care
it's
of
been fun.
and expensive.
And hey, just recently I had painters come in. They took the wallpaper off of the foyer downstairs and up. And I had plasters come in because when they took the wallpaper off, there were little nicks and things, so they thin coated it. And then I had water damage that seeped through the mortar on the outside of the house, and that got into 4 rooms. So I had to have all those fixed. And my bill has been like almost $5,000 for just plasters and painters. Now I'm getting ready to put we have metal ceilings upstairs.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
They're actually called steel.
Yeah.
But anyway, I call them metal. And we have one in the upstairs hallway, and in 3 bedrooms upstairs I have metal ceilings. And now I'm getting ready to put a metal wainscoting up my stairway. And it's going to match the ceiling that's in the upstairs foyer. I think that'll be neat.
Are you painting them or natural metal color?
Polyurethane.
Urethane.
Yeah, which is what I did upstairs.
Okay.
They look nice painted, but I prefer the tin look, so that's what I'm
Some of
planning
those
to-
are even made out of copper and
Oh, yeah. Yes.
different finishes too.
Yes.
So they're
And
anything
they
that-
have duplications now that are not metal
yeah.
that you can buy. They're like, I don't know.
I think it's a kind of resin, isn't it? or
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So,
Not plastic, but it's a different finish.
close to.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing that. I am going to, my ceiling had damage in the northwest parlor, and I had the plasters fix that, and I am going to put a metal ceiling in that room. Gothic. When this house was described by some people that put it in the paper, they called it a Gothic Victorian home. And on the roof, my chimneys have a cross in it. So this is what I'm going to use in that one room. It's a Gothic pattern.
I think in the pattern books you usually see it referred to as a second empire.
Second Empire, really?
And the mansard roof, which is the
Yeah.
very,
Oh, yeah.
very different and very few of them around in this area.
I know. You know what I've read about the mansard roofs? That people put those on their houses when they were building their homes because they were taxed by the number of windows that were in the home, and a mansard roof has no windows. So,
And also, it gave them a little more extra space. Where you have a peaked roof, there's no space under it. But
Yeah.
the mansard roof, you've got almost full ceiling height.
yeah.
Also.
Yeah. So I think what historical events, local, national, international, stand out in your mind? Well, there's a lot going on in our world right now that's very upsetting. Was there a person or event that was a major influence in your life? I think my dad was. He was interesting, sense of humor, smart man.
I always remember your mother and dad so well
At church?
at church.
Uh-huh.
And I think your dad and my dad were friends also.
Oh, yeah.
And they just always seemed so pleasant and very stately, but were so cordial in dealing with people. And
They were a neat
Social.
couple, really. I always had all kinds of friends that were more than welcome in my house growing up. And I think all my friends just loved my folks.
I'm sure they were.
Yeah, they were fun.
Peggy, is there a particular invention or modern convenience that you really couldn't live without, or do you think has changed your life maybe? Make it easier?
I'm thinking that my dishwasher has been a big influence.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Oh, since I'm into history, when I see these articles about how hard the women worked, and I have a vacuum cleaner, I have cleaning ladies, I have it so easy compared to what our ancestors had, that it makes me very thankful.
Sometimes people talk about the good old days, or they'd like to go back. And I think when you do some of the things with washing machines and cleaning and travel,
Really?
I don't really think they want to go back to those days.
It's fun, like when you mention travel, it's fun to go to different countries, which you have a lot, and I have too. It's fun to see how other people live and what they're appreciative of, but I'm telling you, the United States is a great place to live and do anything.
In some of the countries, too, there's such a contrast. You may see the Mercedes, but then in the next block, you'll see a little kid driving some sheep down the road.
Yeah.
And someone on a camel. And then here's another new expensive car. But it's two cultures literally living side by side.
It's really interesting.
You'll see quite that in Marshall or Clark County.
No, you don't. We don't even have a Hollywood anymore.
Well, Peggy, you've given some interesting things, and it's so nice to hear your thoughts about people and all. How about the town of Marshall and say Main Street or Archer Avenue, as you remembered, as compared to today?
Well, of course, they've done a lot with the buildings in downtown Marshall. And Harlan Hall's another example. I think it's gorgeous. And I love going there for all kinds of events. And just basically, most people have really... It looks like a little Victorian town when you stand back and look at all the buildings. And I love that. So I think it's really a neat place to live.
And comment I hear from people visiting here, it's so clean, and people seem to take
yeah.
good care of their
Uh-huh.
business buildings as well as their home.
Oh, yeah. The Candy Kitchen is sad affair because I own the back bar that came out of the Candy Kitchen in my kitchen. And it just kind of breaks my heart that that's not being taken care of. I just noticed the other day the building that was Jerry Wallace's. I like the way the city painted that.
That's not the city.
Who is it?
It's the county.
Oh, yeah. I guess I
But
was.
they have
talking-
done.
It looks
They've
nice.
done a nice job
Yeah,
of
they have.
keeping the old look to that.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the Candy Kitchen. I bet that was one of your hangouts when you were in high
definitely.
school, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It was my dad's hangout. Daddy and I would go to movies that he owned part share of the Strand Theater
Oh, you did.
with Doc Simpson, the veterinarian. And even though my dad was part owner, I still had to pay 9 cents for a ticket to get in. Can you believe that? And yes, we hung out there a lot. Once in a while, I would get money and we'd go down there for lunch. Grilled sandwiches, famous home of the olive net, peanut butter and olive sliced and grilled. And my dad would go in there all the time on his way to work, and he would get a malt with a raw egg in it, which Martha Hall was working there at that time. And she would fix that for my dad. And then after the movie that my dad and I would go to, my mother never went to the movies with us, he and I would go to the Candy Kitchen.
I remember that Strand Theater and the 9 cent
Yeah.
and the cereals. Boy, when something happened on the Saturday night and they cut it off, and well, you didn't know what happened. You had to go back the following week to see what was going on.
Oh, yeah, really? I don't remember that
Yes.
part.
I think I went pretty regularly for 9 cents.
Oh, yeah. What a deal.
Oh, goodness, yes. And then I remember so well, you mentioned the Candy Kitchen, but Rademacher's also owned the ice cream shop.
Where Bill Mealing's office is.
Oh, that delicious ice cream. There was
Really
a
good.
Neapolitan or Metropolitan or something.
White House.
And White House.
Yeah.
And then to
Love
have a
it.
chocolate sundae or a soda over Kiefer's.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Oh, Kiefer's, that was on the corner.
No, it was right.
Oh, Kiefer's drugstore.
Drugstore.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And Mr. Kiefer, of course, was famous for his goat milk.
Really?
And you could order a goat milk soda made with
Yeah.
the ice cream was made out of goat milk.
I didn't know that. And then there was a drugstore across the street where the insurance office is now.
Benson's.
Benson's. Yeah. And that was a neat little place to go in too.
If you were in traveling and say we're in one of the countries in Europe and someone said, well, where are you from and what's that place, what's it like? How would you describe Marshall, or how would you convince them it's a good place to live?
I would describe Marshall as a quaint, well-kept, clean, friendly town. Of course, sometimes not everyone's that friendly.
Well, Peggy, you have been interesting to talk to, and
Oh, thank
we've
you.
got a lot of things that we both remember, I think, about some of the same times.
Yeah.
And I'll bet when you were talking about going to church early, it was probably Monsignor Donahue.
Oh, definitely.
He was such a fixture in town and so well liked by the entire community.
I used to play golf with him.
Oh, he was quite a golfer.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
I remember
Virginia
that.
Smitley played with him, and I played. Of course, he could play any time, and we both had families, so we kind of had to pick our time, to go out with him. But all the men would be working during the day, and he wanted to play, like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
I think
Yeah,
he was
we were good
a pretty good
friends.
golfer too, as I
Yeah.
recall.
He was a neat person.
Well, Peggy, again, I want to thank you for your time. It's been enjoyable, and I don't think you were straining too much once you started talking and telling about these things.
I know.
in your life.
That's what's wrong.
And that's
with it.
exactly the part of the Oral History Project, is that as time marches on, some of these things will be quite interesting to other people.
Yeah. Let's hope.
So with that, I want to say thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And
you.
thanks for your hospitality and time.
Yes. Thank you.